Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, no moral victories. One NBA writer is claiming that the Hawks have a trade problem and the Braves don't play second fiddle to anyone. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We ask you to head over to YouTube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. We are free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorites. Also, Roku and Amazon Fire. That's two more platforms that you can check us out on. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Well, look, the Hawks fought hard last night. They lost 119-116. Really, Bradley Beal was the difference in the game. He had 37 points. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't keep him from getting to the basket. He was arguably the best player on the court last night. He was 17 for 30 last night. But this is a team that had a worse record than you, and they're on the road in your building, okay? Yeah, the Hawks fought hard. Yeah, they kept it close. Yeah, Trae Young had a big night and, yada, 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 yada. There are no moral victories right now, though. This has got to be accumulating wins, and we've got 20 games to go now. Now we're at the 20-game mark where you're going to play the Wizards 3 more times, so you're going to see plenty of them. You have this fakakta thing that next week on the schedule where you play 2 games in 3 nights against Miami, and then you go to Washington and play 2 games in 3 nights against them. So you're going to get a lot of the Wizards, and you better figure out a way to stop Bradley Beal. But, yeah, they fought hard, and, yeah, they were in Quin Snyder's debut, and they did some good things and this and that and whatever like that. But for the Hawks, it's sort of the same old story. You couldn't stop anybody. You couldn't stop anybody late. And really where the Hawks really had their issues in the first half. They were 5 for 19 from 3 in the first half. And they were just never able to really build the kind of lead that had they have hit a few threes in that first half, they might have been able to kind of make this thing a double-digit lead and really make Washington kind of fight from behind. Now, they shot the ball well in the second half. They were 8 for 16 in the second half from 3. But that first half, they just could not buy a 3. But it is the same old story with the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, still not playing enough defense. Just can't get over the hump. Couldn't expand the lead when they really needed to. But there are no moral victories in this thing. Hawks have got to find a way to string together some victories. And, when you look at the Hawks now, they're on pace. The way that they're pacing is 23 wins at home, okay? That's a pacing of 4 less wins than they had last year. They were 27-14 last year. If they win 23 games at home, that's 4 less wins than they had last year. And that's the thing that kept them afloat as far as getting to the play-in round and getting to the play-in tournament. But they have to be better at home. And while we can talk about, well, it's a new era and it's a new dawn and the 2 victories that they had and all this kind of stuff, you got to beat the Wizards. That's one of those teams that you have to beat. If you can't beat them up there, you certainly have to beat them at home. And you didn't take care of business last night. And so, yeah, it's frustrating because now you really are running out of games. There's no more, well, it's early on in the season. Well, we got plenty of time or this, that, and the other. Brother, it's going to go by in a heartbeat. And you're facing teams that are directly behind, directly in front of the Hawks. You're playing plenty of those teams. Washington, Miami. You still got another game with Brooklyn, Boston. Right? You still got plenty of games against all of those teams. And then, here comes Memphis and Golden State, and they're going to come to your building. And then you're going to go on the road to a couple of the Western Conference teams, Minnesota, San Antonio. So you can't think about, well, we're still building and we're still growing and this, that, and the other. The whole reason that they brought this all together was, and the whole reason that they fired a coach and then brought a new guy in 5 days, is you need to win. They're looking at this year. Tony Ressler is looking at, what are we going to do this year? Forget next year. Next year will be next year. We can talk about next year in the offseason when we get there, but we got to show signs of life, and we have to show improvement, and we have to improve our stead. You don't pay a guy. Look at this from a common sense standpoint. You don't pay a guy top tier coaching money in the realm of all of the coaches that have won NBA titles. You don't pay him that kind of money. You don't sign him to a long-term deal. You don't bring him in with 75% of the season over, and you don't just pull him off a beach coming back from vacation if you're not interested in this year. We can talk about, it's building and growth and this and that, and we're going to talk about a story that is by a CBS writer here in just a little bit, but this is about this year, this 20-game stretch. This is big time. This is getting, serious and stringing together wins and improving their standing and still trying to make a run with this thing. And they did some things to strengthen up their bench, and we may talk about that I think their bench is a real X factor moving forward. Now that you got everybody healthy, you have to find a way to win some games. So we can talk about, nothing's really going to change in 20 games, and it's really about the future. No, it is about the future, but it's also about the right now, because they have to figure out if their coach and players can get along. They have to figure out how much say going into the offseason their head coach is going to have. And don't be surprised if we start to hear some things about that. Quin Snyder is a guy who wants to be involved. We heard it from David Locke. I talked to the beat writer for the Utah Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune on my radio show. They've all said that Quin Snyder is a guy who wants to be involved in the process. He wants to be part of that voice in the room and helping to put together the roster. And again, if he did this just for money, he doesn't just need money. He wants to build a winner, and he wants to build it the right way and do it with his kinds of guys. So we can talk about future expectations and where the Hawks are going to be in a year or two or this or that, but they're looking at winning games now. The owner of this team is looking at winning games now. The owner of this team didn't bring a guy in, didn't pay him top tier money, didn't pull him off a beach from vacation just to kind of flounder the rest of this season and bring him in with 75% of the season over with. And his contract is based on the idea of, when he finishes this season, then he'll have 4 more years on his contract. So no moral victories in this thing. Yeah, they played well and this and that and all that kind of stuff. And what can you learn? There are no moral victories. The Hawks and their ownership are looking at, what are we going to do now? What can we do now to improve this ball club and get a spark for these guys and light a fire underneath them? And they're looking at, what can we do to win ball games right now and make a run at this thing? Yeah, we'll deal with the offseason when the offseason comes, but right now it's 20 games and they need to make a run, and you got to take care of your business against the Wizards when you're on your home court. That's the thing. You got to win these home court games, and the Hawks are not doing nearly enough of all of that. All right, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And look, the NBA season is getting wound down and everything like that, but you can still go to FanDuel.com and get your no-sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, easy to use. You can bet on money lines, props, everything in the NBA. But when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, claim your no-sweat first bet, and you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get that $1,000 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. And we remind you to make Hittin' Hard, besides making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available Odyssey, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get all of your podcasts from. So one NBA writer, and this is from Bill Ryder, who put this article out earlier this morning, says that, and this is the title of his article, okay? The Atlanta Hawks have a Trae Young problem. Quin Snyder is there to fix it one way or the other. And they get into the idea of, and they talk to, and this is always my issue with these things, but they talk to NBA executives and an NBA GM off the record, right? They just say NBA GM said, NBA executive said, and all these kinds of things. That's my problem. I mean, if you're going to talk to these guys, I mean, I know that you can't source it. I know that you can't. I know that you can't say that, the whatever. Let's just pick a random team. The Memphis Grizzlies general manager told me that, they have a Trae Young problem, right? But if, it's also a little bit disingenuous to just use the quotes in the article. But they speculate about the idea about why did Quin Snyder take the job now? One NBA executive or one general manager said, quote, the money, why not? Love of the game. There were guys that were given different reasons as to why. But I found this the most interesting part of the article. And I don't know how much this jives. I don't know how much that this is accurate. Because one NBA executive said, or I should say, one NBA GM said that this was all about Kyle Korver and his relationship and kind of schmoozing over the Ressler family, that it was not about Landry Fields. And excuse me here as I'm trying to get here. Here's the quote from them, that Kyle Korver was the one. This is the quote from the article. Kyle Korver was the one, by managing the Resslers effectively, who pushed for Snyder's hire. There are whispers that Landry Fields didn't want Snyder hired in the first place. Now, we know that certainly Kyle Korver was probably the driving force. He knows Quin Snyder. They have a pretty good relationship, right? I mean, I can understand all of that. But the idea that Landry Fields wasn't on board with this, that there are whispers of that, I don't know how much I buy. But I do think that Kyle Korver went to the Ressler family, Tony Ressler and his son Nick, and they definitely, and it was pushed on them that, hey, this is the guy we got to have. And it all makes sense from the standpoint of, look, he was available. He could come in and look, they pulled him off a beach on vacation, right? They pay him top tier money. I mean, you throw, there's an old saying about, they pay you too much money to say no. That's probably the things that, Quin Snyder, thought about. I mean, look, if you're dragging a guy off the beach and he's coming in 3/4 of the way through the season, certainly money's a factor. Certainly personnel decisions are a factor. There are a lot of things to this. Now, I don't agree with the theme of the article that the Hawks have a Trae Young problem. This is an opportunity for Trae Young and Quin Snyder to get on the same page. Now, look, they certainly have to. Your head coach and your star player has to have some kind of relationship. And you saw Chandler Parsons the other day. He basically just said he didn't like Lloyd Pierce. And I understand that. And Lloyd Pierce was never going to be here for the long term. When Lloyd Pierce was hired, he was always a bridge coach to somebody else. And then that ended up being Nate McMillan. They go to the Eastern Conference Finals. He gets a 4-year contract, and then it falls apart. But I don't like the way the article is phrased about the Hawks have a Trae Young problem. If Trae Young, and this is true for any superstar, Trae Young buys in with what Quin Snyder is doing, and they have to have DeJounte Murray buy in, and they have to have John Collins buy in, and they have to have Clint Capella and DeAndre Hunter, and on and on and on and on and on. All of these guys have to buy in, because if not, if they don't buy in, then you get to a situation where what we just had a few weeks ago, well, the message was stale. Well, we needed a new voice. Well, the message was for an older team and different things like that. Then you get to that point where the guys start to tune you out. So does Quin Snyder and Trae Young have to have a relationship that they come together? I don't care if they go to dinners, and I don't care if they do all these, extracurricular stuff. I'm talking about the idea of coach and star player have to come together and be on the same page philosophically for what the franchise wants to do. And if they can do that, the sky's the limit. We talked to David Locke yesterday. I talked to Andy Larson on my radio show. They all say he's one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. He's a basketball savant. He eats, breathes, and sleeps basketball, and he knows more than maybe just about anybody. So if they can all come together, then look, the sky's the limit for all of this. But this idea that the Hawks have a Trae Young problem, they don't have a Trae Young problem. They just have to find the right guy. And as I've said on my radio show, everybody is responsible for where the Hawks are at. The players are responsible. The coach was responsible. The owner was responsible. The front office is responsible. The ticket taker in section, taking tickets in gate 2, is responsible. The beer vendors are responsible. Bob Rathbun's responsible. Everybody who's got a hand in the Hawks organization has led themselves to this. And that's why we're floundering around at 31-31. So I don't believe that Landry Fields, and there's other quotes in the article that talk about the idea of you can't win with Trae Young or this or that. Well, they got 2 games away from being in the NBA Finals. Seems like you can figure out a way to win with Trae Young. But there are always GMs with these agendas. And again, I don't like the idea of you have off the record GMs that say stuff and things like that and talk about other franchises. Again, if you're not going to quote the source, if you're not going to use the source, then don't put the quotes out there about what somebody said. But do the Hawks have a Trae Young problem? No. But do they have to have their star player and their coach come together philosophically to get this franchise over the hump? Absolutely. Trae has to buy in. Quin Snyder has to buy in. And I think when we get to the end of the year, I think definitely Quin Snyder is going to have a big voice in what's going to happen with this roster and different things like that. Don't be surprised if there aren't some changes to the front office or kind of the power play structure when all is said and done. Not right now, but look for that come the off season. But I don't think the Hawks have a Trae Young problem, but they do have to get their star and their coach on the same page. All right, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Listen, everybody's trying to get in shape right now, right? We're trying to get healthier. We're trying to exercise more, trying to get some shape, lose weight, whatever you got going on, okay? Built.com is the place to go where you're looking for your alternative and healthier snacks, whether you want traditional protein bars, whether you want the protein-infused marshmallow puffs, either way that you go, they have all of the great flavors that you would want, from churro to coconut and everything in between. But you're looking for that low-carb, low-sugar, low-calorie snack. Well, Built Bars, by and large, are 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. So you want that healthier alternative. So go to Built.com today, pick you up a box of Built Bars. But when you now you can also go the brick and mortar route where you can go to Walmart in the pharmacy section and get you a box of Built Bars. Or you can go to Sam's Club now and purchase a box of Built Bars. So whether you go the brick and mortar route, whether you go the online route, doesn't really matter. Now you can get all your Built Bars in several different places. Head to Built.com today. Check out their wide menu and their selection of products. Try them today. So The next thing that's out there is this article by Bob Nightengale, who, if you don't know Bob Nightengale, and I've spoken to Bob, I've had him hundreds of times, it seems like, on my show. He's the national baseball writer for USA Today, and he recently spoke to Dansby Swanson about, obviously, he was the hometown kid here in Atlanta, and he took the money, and they talk about the idea that the Braves only offered him 6 years at $100 million. He ended up getting $177 million, and all this kind of stuff. And he talked about, and this is him being quoted in the article, asking about, was he ready to move on from Atlanta, and did he, feel like the negotiations kind of hit stumbling blocks? Quote, well, yes and no. I mean, I feel like ego gets in the way, but they wouldn't let me go, right? I'm a homegrown kid. I've kind of been leading this team for a while. I'm the center, the glue of the team. Like, if there was ever anything more going on, people would come to me, okay? Then obviously they offered them the 6 years, $100 million. He got $177 million to, go to the Cubs and all that kind of stuff. But here's the quote that everybody is kind of latching onto, okay? When he's talking about the Chicago Cubs, all right? Quote, this team means so much to so many people, which is very similar from the place I just came from. From the gist I've gotten so far, pro sports in Chicago are a massive deal. Pro sports in Atlanta are like, well, kind of a deal. It's not a knock against anything about Atlanta. Trust me. I'm a huge Falcons fan, a big Hawks fan, but it's just different. Cubs fans, Cubs everything is just a little bit different. Well, okay. I understand that, going to your new team and different things like that. But let me tell you, okay, here in Atlanta, where the Braves have the biggest radio market of any Major League Baseball team, they have a massive footprint that covers multiple states. And yes, I understand that there is not a professional baseball team that is in Alabama or Tennessee at this point. So I get all of that. But the Braves don't play second fiddle to anybody when it comes to passionate fans. And we've seen over the last couple of years, whether it was the Braves World Series run, whether it's just been playoff baseball and atmosphere, whether it's been the Braves regular season. The Braves, and this is more than just the size of the stadium. Braves are one of the top attendance teams in Major League Baseball, and they have a definite, passionate fan base. Look, I still think the Georgia Bulldogs are number one with a bullet, but the Braves don't play second fiddle to any baseball team, pro sports team when it comes to passion from their fan base. You look at the footprint, you look at the Braves merchandise, you look at all of the things the Braves have, and look, they are a winning franchise and have been for a long, long time, for decades, right? I mean, again, with little blips and stuff like that in between. But if you were here for the 90s and obviously the 14 division titles and all that kind of stuff, they were always one of the top franchises in baseball. Not so much in the 80s and things like that, but certainly now that from the 1990s and through today, they are one of the top franchises in baseball. I don't think that, and I know he wasn't taking a shot at the Atlanta Braves, okay? And it's easy, the Cubs are the lovable losers and all the stuff, even though they got a World Series championship and all that, but they still portray themselves as the lovable losers and different things like that. But it may be Cubs up there, but I promise you that, when you get to those towns, the NFL is still a big deal. People are still Bears fans up there. And when it comes to baseball, we don't play second fiddle to Chicago or anywhere else. You look at our footprint, you look at what we have as an organization, and look, the reason that they moved up north into, the Smyrna, Cobb County area, whatever like that, is to go up toward their fans and have that bigger footprint, right? I mean, they have that bigger footprint that people come from out of state, people come from Alabama, people come from Tennessee to come down and see games. There's a very loyal and passionate fan base that this franchise has. So when you start talking about the idea of, well, it's Cubs, well, again, walk down the street anywhere you want. You'll see Braves merchandise. You'll see guys with Braves hats on. You'll see ladies with Braves jerseys and T-shirts and everything like that. You'll see all the merchandise. You'll see that there are passionate Braves fans. And they have been for a long, long time. And what happened in the 1980s, you have a whole new generation of Braves fans that by and large have known mostly success through the 90s and through this last several years, the last 5 years of winning the division title. You've known nothing but success for your franchise. So it may be Cubs, but certainly don't underestimate the power of the Atlanta Braves and the wide swath that they cut through the fabric of baseball, right? They are one of the most popular teams in baseball. I know Dansby wasn't trying to diss them and this, that, and the other, but there's no less passion from this fan base than there is for the Chicago Cubs. There's no less passion from this fan base for the Atlanta Falcons than there is from the Chicago Bears. The Bears may have been around longer. The Cubs have been around longer. But how many guys, with all due respect, how many guys are still alive from 1901 that are Chicago Cubs fans? That's the only difference in it. So I understand what Dansby was saying, but please don't underestimate the power of Braves fans and pro sports in Atlanta. We may be focused on a lot more college football because they don't really have that up there. You know, Illinois is not exactly, and Champaign, Illinois is not exactly right close to Chicago, and a lot of people are Notre Dame fans up there, but don't underestimate what the Braves footprint has been through the southeastern part of the United States. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on Odyssey, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get all of your favorite podcasts from. We ask you to head over to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. We're free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So wherever you get them, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcast from, you can download us for free there. Roku and Amazon Fire, 2 additional ways that you can check us out. Follow us on those platforms. And then, as always, give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.